This reading is from Janice Raymond's A Passion for Friends. This is the preface to the second edition. The first edition was published in 1986, and this is from 2001. In 1980, when I began writing A Passion for Friends, feminists were not talking much about women's friendships. It was almost as if we thought that feminism itself automatically made us friends. This assumption, as many of us learned, was rather naive. Like others, feminists do not automatically become friends. Although feminists believed and stated that the personal is political, conversely, the political was not always personal. That is, a sisterhood that was created in the struggle for women's liberation did not mean that feminists shared a common world beyond the struggle. We did not necessarily share a space where friendship could occur and thrive. This reprinting of A Passion for Friends takes place on the 15th anniversary of its original publication in 1986. Many of the reasons why I wrote the book are still important today. The invisibility of a tradition of female friendship, the quest to unearth a history of women's friendship that would affirm that women alone, without men, are women together. The recognition that women have always been each other's best friends, supporters, and benefactors, without ignoring the obstacles placed in the way of women's continuing friendships with other women, and the possibilities generated by female friendship for a shared personal, social, political, and economic future for women. Another purpose in writing A Passion for Friends was to articulate a philosophy of female friendship. Historically, the philosophy of friendship has been characterized by lofty, male-centered ideas as expressed by the philosophers of male friendship such as Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Emerson, and Montaigne. These ideas resonated in the realms of power, and in the Greek philosophical tradition, friendship became the basis of the state. Less known is that female friendship historically has invested women with personal and socio-economic power, going far beyond the societies of consolation that women's friendships have been depicted at best to be. In the 1970s and early 1980s, Western feminism was riven by political divisions, particularly among feminists in the United States, the UK, and Australia. One of the divisions was between radical feminists and socialist feminists. By and large, it was socialist feminists who got to define the divisions, because it was they who ended up in institutionalized and secure positions in universities. They generated most of the syllabi, reading lists, and typologies of feminism through which generations of college students came to identify acceptable and unacceptable feminism. For many years, feminist theory in particular was taught by the quote-unquote brands of feminism approach, where specific trends and philosophies of feminism were encrusted in typologies. It seems not to have dawned on feminist scholars that just as the rest of the academy was giving up on typologies, women's studies began embracing this method of teaching and learning, what feminism is and was all about. During these unsettling years, I ranted in women's studies curriculum committee meetings and to my students about the fallacies of the brands of feminism approach. I particularly scorned typologies of radical feminism, always defined by the non-radically feminist, in which radical feminism was labeled ontological, essentialist, simplistic, cultural, and apolitical, and as a feminism focused mainly on women's victimization. The reception of radical feminist theory and activism, largely by once upon a time socialist feminists, now turned postmodernist, has been to classify rather than engage with radical feminist thinking. In the typologies of feminist theory, radical feminism is written about as having meager theoretic grounding. This is largely because the other dominant white paradigms of feminism, namely liberal, socialist, Marxist, and postmodernist, derive their theories from male philosophical traditions that, in turn, authorize them. Catherine MacKinnon has coined the term feminism unmodified for a feminism that is quote unquote unqualified by pre-existing modifiers. It was my goal in A Passion for Friends to focus on female friendship unmodified, that is, to examine the ideas and practices of women's friendships which were independent of men and that placed women at the center of relational existence. But further, I wanted to excavate and analyze female friendship that had social, political, and/or economic purpose beyond the friendship itself. That goal is as relevant today as it was in the 1980s. Since A Passion for Friends was published in 1986, the vibrancy of the international women's movement has given new meaning to women's friendships. In my own life, international feminist advocacy and women's human rights activism around new reproductive technologies, and more recently focused on sex trafficking, prostitution, and other forms of violence against women, have emerged from international friendship networks with women in different parts of the globe. Just as surely, the globalization of female friendship has emerged from the advocacy and activism itself. Much of the feminist organizing that I have been engaged in over the past decade, opposing the globalization of the sex industry and the creeping legalization and regulation of prostitution as sex work, where pimps are redefined as third-party business agents, transforms female friendship into international policies, national and regional legislation, and institutional viability. And it also transforms feminist organizing into female friendships. The policy and institutions we create acquire not only institutional memory, but result in effective institutional structure and give our ideas and friendships consequence in the world. In the absence of political transformation, female friendship remains personal. A growing involvement in international woman power, coalitions, networks, meetings, actions, organizing, conferences, and forums underpins the feminist friendships of the new millennium. The possibilities of a female friendship without boundaries is the hope of this new edition of A Passion for Friends. Janice Raymond, March 2001.